My name is Harper Winslow, and I'm 35 years old. 3 days ago, if you'd asked me about my marriage, I would have told you we were going through a rough patch. That's what I called it to my friends, my coworkers, even to myself. A rough patch. Something you ride out with patience and late-night talks, and maybe a weekend away somewhere with better lighting and cheap wine. I didn't realize that what I was calling a rough patch was actually the part where the road had disappeared and I was still pressing the gas, pretending we weren't already airborne. My husband, Derek Lawson, and I have been married for 6 years. We met through work. Back then, I was a burned-out corporate lawyer trying to reinvent myself as a consultant. Derek worked in marketing at a firm that partnered with the consulting company I'd joined. He was the charming one in the room, the guy who could make quarterly targets sound like a TED Talk and bad news sound like a joke you were lucky to hear. We clicked fast. Coffee meetings turned into after-work drinks. After-work drinks turned into weekends together. We got engaged after a year, married 6 months after that. For the first few years, it really was good. We were that couple that people said just works. Then, about 8 months ago, something shifted. It was small at first. Derek started being weird about his phone, face down on the table, quick to turn the screen away. Work stuff, he'd say, shrugging. He started going out more with the team. Happy hours, client dinners, networking events that somehow always bled into 2 or 3 a.m. When I asked what time he'd be home, he'd sigh like I was asking for a kidney. I can't live by a curfew, Harp. I'm not 16. I tried to be understanding. I really did. I gave him space. I didn't nag. I told myself this was just stress, just a phase, just him blowing off steam. But each night I fell asleep alone, his side of the bed cold and empty. Something in me clenched a little tighter. The breaking point came on a Tuesday night. I'd gotten home from a client meeting around 7 p.m., kicked off my heels, and made dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta and roasted vegetables, the kind of meal you make when you're trying to remind yourself that normal still exists. At 7:30, I texted him, "What time will you be home? Made dinner." He didn't answer. At 8:30, my phone buzzed. Going out with coworkers. Don't wait up. A familiar wave of disappointment washed over me. This was the 4th night that week. I stared at the bubbling sauce on the stove and, before I could stop myself, typed back, "This is the 4th night this week. Can we at least have dinner together once?" No reply. The pasta overcooked. I turned off the stove, shoved everything into containers, and put it in the fridge. I told myself not to take it personally, that adults have lives, that I was being clingy. I tried to watch a show, but my eyes kept drifting to the silent rectangle of my phone on the coffee table. At 10:30 p.m., 2 hours later, my phone finally lit up. "Stop being clingy." I stared at the words so long they blurred. I called him. He answered on the 5th ring, music and voices roaring behind him. "What?" he shouted. "Derek, can we talk for a second?" "I'm busy, Harper." "I know, but we haven't spent any real time together in weeks. I miss you." There was a pause, then flat and cold. "God, you're so needy." The word hit me harder than I expected. Needy. Like wanting to see my husband, to eat a meal with him, was some kind of character flaw. "I'm not being needy," I said, my voice shaking despite my best effort to steady it. "I'm your wife. I'm just asking—" "Stop acting like a wife," he cut in, his tone suddenly razor sharp. "I'll go wherever I want with whoever I want. If you can't handle that, that's your problem." Something in me snapped. It wasn't loud. There was no shouting, no smashed plates, no dramatic exit. Just this quiet, icy stillness that moved through me like a switch being flipped. "All right," I said. "What?" His voice sharpened, like he hadn't expected that answer. "I said all right, do whatever you want." "Oh, so now you're going to punish me with the silent treatment?" "No," I replied, oddly calm. "No punishment, just accepting reality. Have a good night, Derek." I hung up. He called back twice. I let it ring. A text followed. "Don't be dramatic. We'll talk when I get home." I stared at the message, then set the phone face down on the coffee table. For a moment, I just sat there in the dim living room, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator and my own heartbeat in my ears. Here's what Derek didn't know. Before I became a consultant, I spent 3 years practicing corporate law. I burned out on 80-hour weeks and endless discovery disputes, but the degree and the bar card didn't vanish just because I changed my LinkedIn headline. I still knew how to read contracts. I still knew where people like to bury the knives. 6 months earlier, Derek's parents, Alan and Patricia Lawson, had asked me for help. They own a small but successful manufacturing company. About 50 employees, steady revenue, the kind of business you don't see on magazine covers, but that quietly pays for mortgages and college tuitions. They'd signed several long-term supplier contracts they weren't comfortable with, and they wanted an extra set of eyes. I'd taken the files home, read them carefully, and found problems. Big ones. Hidden clauses that allowed unilateral price hikes of up to 300% with only 30 days' notice. Auto-renewal provisions that would lock them in for another 5 years if they didn't give notice 6 months before the end of the current term, which at the time was only a few weeks away. I'd written detailed memos, drafted counter-proposals, even identified alternative suppliers with better terms. I had the whole roadmap to keep their business from being strangled. But I hadn't sent any of it, because when I first tried to talk to Derek about it, he'd waved a hand and said, "My parents are already stressed. Don't dump more on them right now. We'll deal with it later." And then later disappeared under his late nights and our crumbling marriage, and I'd let the folder sit in my office, gathering dust and guilt. Now sitting on our couch at 11 p.m. while my husband was out somewhere smelling like someone else's cologne, I realized I'd been protecting people who couldn't be bothered to protect me. I went to the small room we called my office, a spare bedroom with a desk, 2 overworked plants, and a printer that always chose violence. I pulled out the thick folder labeled Lawson Manufacturing, Supplier Contracts, and opened my laptop. Subject line, Contract Review, Urgent Action Required. Body, concise, professional, and blunt. As requested 6 months ago, I've completed my review of your supplier contracts. I've identified several critical issues that require immediate attention. I'm available to discuss tomorrow at your convenience. I attached the memos, the draft language, the comparison charts. My finger hovered over the trackpad for a heartbeat. Then I hit send. It was 11:47 p.m. Derek stumbled in at 3 a.m. I was still awake, propped up in bed with a book I hadn't turned a page of in an hour. He reeked of alcohol and a cologne that definitely wasn't his. "You're still up," he slurred. "Couldn't sleep," I said. He kicked off his shoes, not bothering to pick them up when they bounced against the wall. "Are you going to lecture me?" he asked, already defensive. "Nope." "Good." He disappeared into the bathroom, came back without brushing his teeth, and collapsed into bed, face down, fully dressed. 5 minutes later, he was snoring. I got up, took my pillow, and went to the guest room. The next morning, my alarm went off at 6 a.m. The house was quiet. Derek was dead to the world. I showered, dressed, and made coffee. The motions so automatic they felt like muscle memory more than choice. At 7:15, my phone buzzed. A text from Alan Lawson. "Got your email. Can you come to the office at 9? This is serious." I stared at the message, feeling that strange calm settle over me again. "I'll be there," I typed back. I left the house at 8:30 without waking Derek. Lawson Manufacturing sat in a modest industrial park. Office in the front, warehouse in the back, the air always faintly tinged with oil and cardboard. Alan met me at the door, eyes shadowed, jaw tight. "Harper, thank you for coming," he said, gripping my hand. "I read everything you sent. I can't believe we missed this." "These contracts are designed to be confusing," I said. "That's the point." We walked into the small conference room where Patricia and their accountant were already waiting. My memos and printouts spread across the table like we were preparing for a trial. "How bad is it?" Patricia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "If the supplier exercises these clauses," I said, sliding a page toward them, "they could increase prices by up to 300% with 30 days' notice. Combined with the auto-renewal trap, this could bankrupt you within a year." Patricia's hand flew to her mouth. Alan went pale. "What do we do?" he asked. "We renegotiate," I said, immediately. "I've prepared counter-proposals and identified alternative suppliers. You have more leverage than you think, if you use it now." For the next hour, I walked them through each clause, each risk, each proposed fix. The air was thick with numbers and possibilities and the cold, clean relief of finally knowing where the landmines were. "How much do we owe you for this?" Alan asked when we finally paused. This is real legal work. You might have saved our business." "Nothing," I said automatically. "Your family." He shook his head hard. "No, this is professional work. We're paying you, at least your standard consulting rate." I opened my mouth to argue, and then the conference room door opened. Derek stood there, frozen. His eyes darted from the spread of contracts to my open laptop to his parents' stricken faces. "What are you doing here?" he asked. Patricia answered before I could. "She's saving our business." Derek's gaze snapped back to me. 6 months ago? He repeated when Alan mentioned the original request. You've been working on this for 6 months? I nodded. I told you about it. You said your parents were too stressed, so I waited. And you didn't tell me you were meeting them this morning? You stopped asking about my work months ago, I said quietly. You didn't seem interested. Something flickered across his face. Guilt, anger, I couldn't tell. Derek, Patricia said sharply, where were you last night? Your father tried calling you around 10 about this. You didn't answer. Color rose in his cheeks. Out with friends, he muttered. We'll talk about it later. Alan's gaze moved between us. Is everything okay with you two? I held his eyes. Ask your son. Derek's jaw clenched. We need to talk, he said to me through his teeth. Outside. Now. I closed my laptop, forcing my hands not to shake. I'll be right back, I told his parents. We stepped out into the parking lot, the morning air cooler than I'd expected. For a second, we just stood there, the hum of traffic in the distance, the smell of exhaust and coffee from the neighboring building hanging between us. What the hell was that? He demanded. What was what? Ambushing me, making me look bad in front of my parents. I didn't ambush you, I said, keeping my tone even. I had a scheduled meeting about their contracts. You showed up. You've been doing all this behind my back. I tried to talk to you 6 months ago, I reminded him. You said they were stressed and we should not make a big deal out of it. Then you stopped coming home before 3 a.m., and I figured saving your parents' business was more important than waiting for you to care. Our marriage isn't falling apart, he snapped. You told me last night to stop acting like a wife, I said quietly. You come home at 3 a.m., smelling like a bar, and someone else's cologne. You spend more time with your coworkers than with me. If this isn't falling apart, what is it? He opened his mouth, closed it again. I need space, he said finally. You're suffocating me. I gave you space, I said. I've been giving you space for months. You've used it to disappear into a life that doesn't include me. You're being dramatic. Am I? I asked. When's the last time we had dinner together? A real conversation? The last time you came home before midnight? He didn't answer. That's what I thought, I said. I took a breath, felt the calm settle over me again. Your parents need help with these contracts. That has nothing to do with you and me. So I'm going back in there to finish what I started. You can join us or leave. That part is up to you. I turned and walked back toward the office, my heart pounding so loud I could feel it in my fingertips. I didn't look back to see if he followed. Derek didn't come back into the conference room. I walked in alone, sat down, and opened my laptop like my marriage wasn't hanging by a thread outside in the parking lot. Alan and Patricia both watched me closely. Is everything all right? Patricia asked. We're having problems, I said carefully, but that's separate from this. Right now, we need to focus on these contracts. The deadline on that auto-renewal clause is in less than 2 weeks. If we don't act, the supplier locks you in for 5 more years on terrible terms. Alan ran a hand over his face. Then let's act. We went back to work. For the next 2 hours, we combed through strategies. We rehearsed what to say on the negotiation calls, which clauses were non-negotiable, which we could afford to compromise on. I showed them the financial projections, the version where they fought back, and the version where they stayed quiet and bled out slowly. The numbers were stark. Why didn't we see any of this? Patricia whispered. Because most people don't speak this language, I said softly, pointing at the tiny, weaponized lines of text. You weren't supposed to see it. That was the design. When we finally paused, Alan looked at me with something like awe and shame mixed together. How much? He asked again. I'm not asking as your father-in-law. I'm asking as a client who knows you've probably saved us from ruin. You don't owe me anything, I said automatically. Really, Alan, I'm glad I can help. He shook his head hard. Harper, this is real, specialized work. We're paying you. We'll figure out the structure later. A project fee, a retainer, something. But you're not doing this for free. Before I could argue, his phone started ringing. He glanced at the caller ID. It's the accountant. I'll take this in my office. When he left, Patricia reached across the table and touched my hand. Harper, she said quietly, her voice trembling, how bad is it between you and Derek? The question landed like a stone in my chest. I thought about lying, about saying we were fine, just stressed. But I was tired of lies. His, mine, everyone's. Pretty bad, I said. Bad enough that I slept in the guest room last night. Bad enough that I don't know if we're going to make it. Her eyes filled with tears. I had no idea, she whispered. He doesn't talk to me about feelings. He barely talks to me about anything beyond surface stuff. That's not your fault, I said. He barely talks to me either. She hesitated, then asked, Is there someone else? The question I'd been circling in my own head for months. I don't know, I admitted. Maybe. He's definitely checked out of us. He comes home at 3 in the morning, smelling like a bar and strangers, and expects me not to notice. What are you going to do? I haven't decided yet, I said honestly. Right now, I'm taking it one day at a time and making sure your contracts don't destroy your business. She squeezed my hand, her fingers cold and shaking. Whatever happens between you and Derek, I want you to know we're grateful for this, for you. Or I nodded, swallowing the knot in my throat. The meeting wrapped up around 1 in the afternoon. We had a plan, a set of calls scheduled, drafts to finalize. Alan walked me out to my car, promising to email me a list of all their active contracts for a broader review. You've given us breathing room, he said. I don't know how to thank you. Just follow through, I replied. Breathe while you still can, and don't sign anything without letting me look at it first. He laughed weakly. Deal. I drove home on autopilot, my hands on the steering wheel, my mind replaying last night's phone call on a loop. Stop acting like a wife. I'll go wherever I want, with whoever I want. Our street looked the same as always. Trim lawns, recycling bins, the neighbor's dog doing his daily patrol like he owned the cul-de-sac. Derek's car was already in the driveway, so he'd beaten me home. Inside, I found him in the living room, sitting on the couch with his phone in his hand, jaw tight. We need to talk, he said. Okay, I replied, setting my bag down. We sat across from each other like strangers at a mediation. My parents called me, he started. They told me how much you've done, how you've been working on their contracts for months, how serious this all is. Yes, I said. Why didn't you tell me? His tone was accusatory, as if he didn't remember the conversation where he'd dismissed it. I did tell you, I said quietly. You didn't care. You were too busy with your own life to ask about mine. That's not fair. Isn't it? I asked. When's the last time you asked about my work? My day? Anything that wasn't directly about you or your team drinks? He looked down at his phone. I've been going through stuff, he muttered. What stuff? I pressed. Because from where I'm standing, it looks a lot like you using stuff as an excuse to disappear. He exhaled sharply. I feel trapped, okay? Like I got married too young and missed out on everything. My friends are out traveling, dating, trying new things, and I'm just here, in this routine. Same house, same conversations, same grocery list every Sunday. We got married at 29, Derek, I said flatly. That's not too young. And stability isn't a prison sentence. You agreed to this life. You helped build it. I know, he said, rubbing the bridge of his nose. But lately I look around and I feel like I skipped some version of my 20s I was supposed to have. It's like everyone else is still free. And I'm what? I asked. The warden? He flinched. It's not about blame, he said. It's just how I feel. Okay, I said slowly. So what do you want to do about it? Keep staying out until 3 a.m., pretending you're single? Keep telling me to stop acting like a wife while you reap all the benefits of having one? That's not what I'm doing. Then who were you with last night? I asked. Coworkers? Friends? Male? Female? A mix? He hesitated too long. It was a group, he said finally. From work. Who drove you home? I took an Uber. At 3 in the morning. Yes. Show me the receipt, I said. His head snapped up. What? Your Uber receipts, messages, whatever. Show me. I'm not showing you my phone, Harper. That's controlling. I stared at him, incredulous. I'm not trying to control you. I'm trying to trust you, but you're not giving me anything to work with. He stood up, pacing, raking a hand through his hair. I can't do this, he said. This interrogation, this suspicion. I feel like I'm on trial in my own house. You feel like you're on trial, I repeated slowly, because your behavior looks guilty. You vanish at all hours. You insult me when I ask where you are. You refuse basic transparency, and then you want me to swallow it with a smile. Maybe I just need some space to figure things out, he said, away from all of this pressure. Space, I repeated. You mean more nights out, more 3 a.m. arrivals, more pretending you're not married. Forget it, he snapped. I'm going to a friend's place. Which friend? I asked. He grabbed his keys. Does it matter? It does to me, I said. I'm your wife, not some roommate you can ghost. He didn't answer. The door slammed behind him a second later. The silence that followed felt heavier than any shouting match. I stood there for a long time, listening to the echo of the door, the hum of the fridge, the faint traffic outside. Then I picked up my bag, went to my office, and opened my laptop. If my marriage was going to crumble, I wasn't going to let my career go with it. I spent the rest of Wednesday working from home, drafting letters for the supplier, refining the negotiation script, laying out detailed side-by-side comparisons of alternative vendors so Alan and Patricia wouldn't feel like they were stepping into the dark. Derek didn't come home that night. He didn't call, didn't text. No, I made it safe. No, I'll be late. Nothing. I slept in the guest room again, not because I was mad, but because our bed felt like a stage set for a life we weren't living anymore. On Thursday morning, Alan called. "We're meeting with the main supplier at 2 p.m., he said, his voice brisk but tense. "Can you be there?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "Good, we want you leading the negotiation." I blinked. "Are you sure? I'm not officially representing you." "As of this morning, you are," he replied. "I'm retaining you as our legal consultant. $50,000 for this project, non-negotiable." My jaw actually dropped. "Alan, that's too much." "It's what you're worth," he cut in. "Take it, or I'll add another zero just to be stubborn." Despite everything, I laughed. Deal. I hung up and stared at my phone for a moment, the number still echoing in my head. $50,000. For work I could do with my eyes half closed. For expertise I'd been devaluing in my own mind because my husband couldn't be bothered to ask what I was capable of. Something inside me shifted. I wasn't just a wife trying to hold together a marriage with duct tape and denial. I was the person walking into boardrooms and saving companies from contracts designed to destroy them. I got dressed more carefully than usual that afternoon. Navy blazer, white blouse, hair up, makeup precise. Not for Derek, for me. For the woman who was about to walk into a negotiation on behalf of a family that actually wanted her there. At the supplier's office, the air in the conference room felt charged. Their reps sat across from us, confident in the way people get when they think the fine print has already won the war. They weren't expecting me. I laid out our position calmly, clause by clause, risk by risk. I explained why the terms were unacceptable, what would need to change, and how quickly. When they tried to wave me off, "These are standard provisions. Every client signs this." I slid a folder across the table. "These," I said, "are signed term sheets from 2 competing suppliers with better pricing, better escalation language, and no predatory auto-renewal. We'd prefer to keep working with you, but we won't do it on terms that could bankrupt Lawson Manufacturing. So either we adjust this agreement or we move." "You're bluffing," their head of sales said, though his eyes flickered when he saw the comparison numbers. "Try me," I said, meeting his gaze steadily. "You have 48 hours. When we walked out of that building, Alan actually hugged me in the parking lot. "That was beautiful," he said, laughing in disbelief. "I've never seen them look so rattled." "It was necessary," I replied. "They've been taking advantage of you for years. They're not anymore." I should have felt nothing but triumph. Instead, beneath the rush of professional satisfaction, there was this hollow ache. I could walk into a room full of seasoned negotiators and make them blink, but I couldn't get my own husband to look me in the eye and tell me the truth. We went for coffee after the meeting. Alan insisted, claiming he needed something warm to keep my heart from exploding. Patricia joined us a few minutes later, her face lighter than I'd seen it in months. "We might actually survive this," she said, half laughing, half crying. "Harper, I can't believe what you just did in there." "I can," Alan said firmly. "I've never seen someone dismantle a contract trap that fast. They didn't know what hit them." I smiled, but it didn't quite reach my eyes. The praise warmed me, but it also reminded me how rarely I heard that tone from Derek anymore, like I was someone to be proud of, not someone to tolerate. My phone buzzed. "Derek." I stared at the screen for a moment before answering. "Hello? Where are you?" he asked. His voice was softer than usual, almost cautious. "Meeting with your parents," I said. "We just wrapped up the supplier negotiation." That's today, right?" "Yes." "How did it go?" "Really well, actually." "That's good." Silence stretched between us. "Harper, where have you been?" The question startled me. "Where have I been? I was home all night. You're the one who didn't come back." "I stayed at Ryan's," he said quickly. "I told you I needed space to think." "Did you?" I asked quietly. "Because it felt more like disappearing." Another long pause. "Yeah," he said. I thought about things. I want to try couples therapy." I closed my eyes, letting the words settle. I'd been waiting months to hear anything resembling effort, honesty, something that wasn't defensiveness or deflection. "Okay," I said slowly. "I'm open to that." "Really?" "Yes. But Derek, if we're doing this, you need to be honest with me. No more half-truths. No more staying out until 3 a.m. No more telling me I'm needy for wanting my husband around." I know, he said. I can do that. Can you? I pressed. Because talk is easy. I need to see change. I will, he said. I promise. All right, find a therapist and set up an appointment. I will. We hung up. When I looked up, Alan was watching me gently. Everything okay? Maybe, I said. He wants to try therapy. That's a good sign, isn't it? I shrugged. It's a start. Whether it's enough, I don't know. I didn't say the part that scared me most. I wasn't sure I wanted him back the way he was. The next few days were a strange limbo, like living with a roommate I used to love. Derek came home every night, but avoided emotional proximity. He'd hover in the kitchen, offer half smiles, ask if I needed anything, but the gulf between us stayed wide. Then, Friday afternoon, the supplier responded with a counteroffer, not perfect, but close enough. We accepted with a few modifications. Alan called me immediately. You saved us at least $400,000 over the next 3 years, he said. At least. That's not an exaggeration, I asked, stunned. Not even slightly. Patricia and I, we don't know how to thank you. You already did, I said. You put your trust in me. No, he corrected. Trust is one thing. This is a debt, and we intend to repay it properly. His voice softened. We want you to review all of our contracts going forward, retainer-based. We'll send you a proposal. I felt warmth unfurl in my chest, long overdue recognition of the skills I'd let dull under the weight of Derek's neglect. That means a lot, I said. Thank you. When I got home, Derek was in the kitchen, cooking, for me. He'd set out pasta, salad, even lit a candle, the kind we only burned on anniversaries or when guests were coming over. What's this? I asked, genuinely surprised. An apology, he said quietly. I've been terrible, I know that. I want to fix things. It was the first dinner we'd shared in weeks. The silence was still awkward, but it was a trying silence, not a resentful one. We talked about small things, a new project at his work, a book I was reading. It felt strange, fragile, almost like we were dating again, trying to figure out how to talk to each other. After dinner, Derek stood stiffly at the sink, hands braced on the edge. My mom told me what you found, he said. Oh, that you might have saved their business. That might be dramatic, I said lightly. She said without you, they could have gone bankrupt. It's possible, I admitted. Those contracts were designed to trap them, he swallowed. And you've been working on this. While I've been... He trailed off, ashamed. Yes, I said simply. He turned toward me. Harper, there's no one else. I didn't respond. You don't believe me, he said softly. I want to, I said. But Derek, you come home at 3 a.m. You smell like someone else's cologne. You refuse to show your phone. What am I supposed to think? His posture softened. Slowly he pulled out his phone, unlocked it, and held it out. Look, he said. I stared at it. You're sure? Yes, I need you to trust me. So look. My heart hammered as I took it. Messages, call logs, Uber rides, group chats with coworkers, late-night photos from crowded bars, timestamps that matched his stories. Everything was messy, but innocent. The cologne smell was probably just from being in tight spaces with other people. I exhaled shakily. Relief rushed through me, followed by humiliation. I'm sorry, I whispered. I should have trusted you. No, he said. I gave you every reason not to trust me. I pulled away. I made you feel unimportant. That's on me. We talked until midnight, about hurt, resentment, distance, fear. For the first time in months, it felt like he was actually there, not just occupying a room. Before bed, he touched my hand lightly. I want us back, Harp, he said, really back. I didn't promise anything, couldn't, but I didn't pull my hand away either. 3 days later, we had our first therapy appointment. Our therapist, Marianne, was in her 50s, calm, warm, with a voice that felt like a heated blanket. She listened as Derek explained his trapped feelings and his fear of being boring or growing old too fast. Then she listened to me describe the loneliness of being married to someone who treated my presence like background noise. The session was raw, uncomfortable, but real. Still, something subtle shifted in my peripheral vision throughout that hour. Every time Derek's phone buzzed, silenced but still lighting up, his eyes flicked toward it. Just for a moment. Just enough to register. Just enough to make my stomach tighten. The name on the screen flashed once before he turned it face down. A woman's name. One he had mentioned before. One he'd vaguely described as a coworker from another team. Someone he hadn't disclosed much about. Someone who, my instincts whispered, might not be just a coworker after all. By the end of the session, I had regained something I hadn't had in months. Clarity. Something was still missing, something Derek hadn't said, something hovering in the space between us like a shadow, and I was going to find out what it was. Marianne ended our session with a gentle smile and a homework assignment. I want you both to write down, she said, what you feel you've lost in this marriage and what you still want to save. Derek nodded, eyes down, the picture of contrition. But the moment his phone lit up again, with that same woman's name, something in his jaw tightened. He flipped the phone over, face down. Sorry, he murmured. Work. Sure. We walked to the car in silence. Derek reached for my hand, but I pretended to adjust my bag and avoided it. Not out of spite, out of caution. Therapy had opened a window, but the air coming through it didn't feel clean yet. In the car, he cleared his throat. You want to grab coffee or something? Keep the momentum going? I stared straight ahead. Not today, I said. I need time to process. He exhaled, disappointed but not surprised. Yeah, okay. We drove home in that brittle silence, the kind that wasn't hostile but certainly wasn't healed. Over the next week, the rhythm of our life shifted again, slowly, shakily, but perceptibly. Derek came home earlier, cooked twice, cleaned without being asked. He even scheduled our next therapy session without me reminding him. But the texts kept coming. From her. Her name, Lena Hart, would flash on his screen and vanish before I could blink. Sometimes he'd tilt the phone away. Sometimes he'd let it sit there, buzzing against the countertop like a heartbeat he couldn't ignore. Every time he swore it was nothing. She's just on my team, he'd say when I asked. We've been working on a client pitch together. It's not a big deal. Maybe. But I'd spent years practicing law. Years reading subtext, body language, the quiet panic in someone's voice when they were trying to conceal, not a crime, but a truth. And Derek's truth was simmering just beneath the surface. Meanwhile, my own life, my work, was expanding faster than I'd prepared for. Alan and Patricia kept me busy, reviewing contracts, redrafting agreements, preparing them for negotiations they hadn't had the confidence to attempt before. Within a week, they sent me a retainer contract, a year-long arrangement for legal consulting at a rate that made my breath catch. I can't accept this, I told Alan when we met at the office. You can, he said. You should, and you will. Patricia nodded firmly. You've saved our company once already. We're not waiting for another disaster to call you. I felt something swell in my chest. Not pride exactly, but reclamation. A reclaiming of the part of me I'd let dim for the sake of keeping a man comfortable. I signed the retainer. The next Thursday, Alan called me unexpectedly. We're meeting with someone new tomorrow, he said. A potential strategic partner. Big opportunity. Their consultant will be presenting. That's great, I said. Want me there? Please. You're the only one who actually knows what any of this legal language means. I laughed, but something in his tone sounded significant. He hesitated. Just be prepared, okay? The consultant is sharp and familiar with our type of business. Prepared for what? I asked. He exhaled, hedging. You'll see. The next day, I arrived at Lawson Manufacturing in a fitted charcoal suit, hair pulled back, a binder full of notes under my arm. I felt strong, steady, like myself again. I walked into the conference room, and the world tipped sideways. Because sitting across the table, polished, poised, the picture of professional confidence, was Lena Hart. The woman whose name kept lighting up Derek's phone. The woman he once dated in college. The woman he had never mentioned still being in his orbit. Her eyes snapped up as I entered. Recognition hit her features like a spark. Oh, she said softly, you're Harper. Her voice was smooth, controlled, but I heard the guilt underneath it. Alan and Patricia exchanged glances. Those glances. The ones that said so, this is what we were afraid of. I took a seat, calm, cold, controlled. Nice to meet you, Lena, I said, extending my hand. She accepted it, her grip firm but nervous. I've heard a lot about you. I smiled tightly, I'm sure. Alan cleared his throat, shaking off the tension. All right, let's begin. The meeting lasted an hour in which Lena presented a polished proposal, solid analysis, clean numbers, well-researched projections. She was good, very good. But I was better. Every time she offered a recommendation, I dissected it gently but thoroughly. Found blind spots, identified legal risks she hadn't considered, strengthened points she'd weakened. By the end, even she looked impressed, if not slightly rattled. As long as Harper is advising you, Lena said finally, you're in excellent hands. Patricia flashed me a proud smile. We know. But Lena's eyes lingered on me a second too long, and in that moment I saw it. Not attraction, not rivalry, guilt. She knew something Derek hadn't told me. After the meeting, Alan and Patricia stayed behind with Lena to discuss follow-up items. I gathered my notes, heading for the hall. I didn't make it 3 steps before Lena touched my arm. "Harper, can we talk privately?" My heartbeat thudded once, hard, like a fist against a locked door. "Sure," I said. "Let's talk." She led me to a quiet corner of the hall. "I want to be clear," she said immediately. "Nothing happened between me and Derek." I raised an eyebrow. "Is that the opening statement or the conclusion?" She winced. "Both." I folded my arms. "Okay, then why are you here, Lena? How do you know my husband?" Her throat worked. "We used to date," she said. "College. We were together for almost 3 years." "I know that part," I said. "He told me, once." "But he didn't tell you we've been working together for the past 6 months, did he?" There it was, like a knife sliding neatly between ribs. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "No, he didn't." She hesitated, then added, "We've talked. A lot." He vented to me about feeling stuck, trapped, like he wasn't ready for the life he chose. My blood went cold. "He didn't cheat," she said quickly. "Not physically, but he leaned on me, more than he should have. I told him it wasn't appropriate, that he needed to talk to you instead." I stared at her. "And yet," I said slowly, "he didn't." "No," she said softly, "he didn't." When I walked back into the conference room to grab my binder, Alan and Patricia fell silent. They'd seen my face, and whatever expression I carried told them everything they needed to know. "We need to talk," I told Derek later that night. But not at home, and not alone. At his parents' office, where the truth had already begun to unravel. I texted Derek, "We need to talk. Meet me at your parents' office in 30 minutes. He replied instantly, faster than he had responded to me in months. "Is everything okay?" "No, but it will be honest. Come." I drove in silence, my hands steady on the wheel, my heartbeat anything but. The industrial park was quiet at dusk, the warehouse lights glowing like a stage set for a confrontation I hadn't planned, but suddenly needed. Alan and Patricia were still in the building, reviewing documents from the meeting. They looked up when I entered, both of them reading something in my face, something cold and final. "Do you want us to step out?" Patricia asked gently. "No," I said. "I think you should stay." Alan nodded once, grim. He'd grown protective of me in the last week. More protective than my own husband had been in months. Derek arrived 5 minutes later, slightly out of breath, hair mussed like he'd run a hand through it a dozen times on the drive over. "What's going on?" he asked, looking from me to his parents. "Why here?" I stood at the head of their small conference table, the same spot where I'd walked them through the landmines in their contracts. Tonight, I was walking someone else through a different kind of minefield. "Sit," I said. He sat. I didn't. I placed my binder on the table and folded my hands, keeping my voice steady. "I met Lena Hart today." Every muscle in Derek's body tensed. That alone told me enough. She was consulting for the partner company?" he asked carefully. "Yes," I said. "She is very competent, very prepared, very familiar with your parents' business." Silence. Patricia shot Derek a look so sharp he flinched. I continued, "She and I spoke privately. She told me you've been leaning on her for emotional support." His jaw clenched. "It's not like that." "Then what is it like?" I asked. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you ran to your ex-girlfriend to confide in her about being trapped in our marriage." He closed his eyes, a long exhale escaping his chest. "Shame. Real shame." "She said nothing physical happened," I added. "I believe her." He opened his eyes slowly. "But you don't believe me." "I don't believe you gave me the whole truth," I said, "and that's the part that matters." He ran a hand through his hair. "Harper, I was overwhelmed. It felt easy talking to someone who already knew who I used to be, before adulthood happened, before expectations. Before I existed?" I asked sharply. "No," he whispered. "Not before you. Just before I felt inadequate all the time." Patricia inhaled sharply. "Inadequate?" Derek swallowed hard, glancing at his parents but speaking to me. "You walk into every room like you belong there," he said. "Like you understand everything before I even finish reading it. You're brilliant, Harp. You're decisive. You don't get stuck the way I do. I feel like I'm always 2 steps behind you, like you're already solving the problem while I'm still figuring out what the problem is." His voice shook. "And then my parents started calling you for help with things I should have been helping with. They trust you more than they trust me. They look at you like you're the future of this company, not me. And it made me feel small." Alan's eyes widened. "Derek!" He held up a hand. "Dad, I'm not blaming you. I'm just telling the truth." I stared at him, stunned into stillness. This was not the confession I expected. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't flattering. It wasn't manipulative. It was real. Instead of admitting how I felt, Derek continued, I started pulling away, staying out later, talking to Lena, making you the bad guy so I didn't have to face the fact that I was the one sabotaging us. My throat tightened, not with pity, just with the weight of finally hearing the truth. Alan leaned forward. You should have come to us, son. You should have told us you felt pushed out. We never meant to make you feel replaceable. Derek shook his head miserably. I know. And it wasn't your responsibility to monitor my ego. It was my responsibility to be a grown-up. Patricia wiped tears from her eyes silently. I took a slow breath. Why didn't you tell me about Lena? Why hide that you were working with her? His voice cracked. Because I knew it looked bad. I knew if I told you, you'd ask questions I wasn't ready to answer. Like why I felt so comfortable talking to her instead of you. And I didn't want to admit that I was choosing the easier audience. I felt the words land deep inside me. Heavy, painful, true. And I didn't cheat, he added quickly. Not physically, not emotionally, intentionally, but I can see why it feels that way. It feels that way, I said, because you built a world I wasn't allowed into. You shared parts of yourself with her that you wouldn't share with me. He closed his eyes again, defeated. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Alan stood abruptly, the chair scraping the floor. He pointed at Derek, voice shaking. You don't treat your wife that way, he said. Not this woman. Not after everything she's done. For us, for you. Patricia put a hand on her husband's arm to calm him, but her eyes were full of hurt too. Derek, she whispered, we expected better. He buried his face in his hands. I stood still, watching him fall apart in front of the two people whose respect he'd feared losing. But I didn't feel satisfaction, or triumph, or revenge. I felt clarity. Quiet, final, steady. I'm going to make this simple, I said, my voice calm and low. We can try to rebuild our marriage, but I'm not competing with your ex-girlfriend. I'm not tolerating half-truths and emotional side doors. I'm not accepting a version of you that runs from responsibility and calls it freedom. He looked up at me, eyes red. What do you want me to do? Cut her off, I said. No private texts, no late-night confessions, no emotional outsourcing. He nodded rapidly. Done. Show me consistent change, I continued. Not apologies, actions. Done, he whispered again. And if you ever make me feel like a placeholder in my own marriage again, I said softly, I will walk away with my dignity and the career I've rebuilt without you. He swallowed hard. I understand. There it was, the line drawn, clean, sharp, undeniable. I gathered my binder and stepped back. This conversation is over, I said. We'll talk more at home, not now. I walked out into the cool evening air, my pulse beginning to slow. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't the one breaking. I was the one choosing. 3 months later, I sit at my desk, my office now, a spacious converted loft I leased after the retainer work expanded into a full consulting practice. Contract drafts are scattered around me. My calendar is full for weeks. Derek and I, we're not perfect, but we're honest, transparent, working, and he hasn't spoken to Lena since that night. Counseling hasn't magically healed everything, but it's peeled back the layers of resentment and fear and let us build something new. Not the marriage we had, but the marriage we're trying to become. A partnership, not a performance. Sometimes I catch him looking at me like he did in the beginning, like I'm someone to admire, not avoid. And slowly, cautiously, I let myself hope again. Because what I almost lost taught me something irreplaceable. Never dim yourself for someone who would rather stand in your shadow than walk beside you.